Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited you're joining us for this engaging topic of mainframe APIs and modern DevOps. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'll serve as your host and moderator for today's webinar. A few housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded, and along with the slides, will be available on DevOps.com later today. You'll receive an email with a link to the webinar content. So don't worry, all that information will be available after the show today. We highly encourage questions from the audience for our speakers. Our speakers love questions. So please enter your questions into the question box within the GoToWebinar control panel. We've set aside a good bit of time at the end for some Q&A. So please enter your questions. You can do that anytime during the webinar, and we'll pick them up when the presenters are finished with their content. Last but not least, we'll award our three $50 Amazon gift cards at the conclusion of the webinar. So please hang in there to find out who wins. Now let's quickly move to our topic, mainframe APIs and modern DevOps. It's my pleasure to introduce our two speakers for today. First, Michal Shupak from Broadcom, and we also have Guilherme Cartier with IBM Global Services. Michal and Cartier, I'll hand the webinar baton over to you, so take it away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Again, hello everybody. My name is Michal Shupak. I'm the product manager in Mainframe division of Broadcom, and I'm responsible for API mediation layer product, which was some time ago contributed to Zowe open source project. I held multiple roles, and I started as a software engineer on one of the mainframe automation products called OpsMVS, and then I switched to being an engineering manager, where I would build the teams for the scope, which eventually translated into well-known Zowe consortium. And it has been over 10 years I work in mainframe industry. I'm located in Prague. So for those who know Prague, it's a very beautiful city. And I was one of the first employees actually of the PTC, which is Prague Technology Center located in Prague. And it's one and only, I think, the mainframe hub we have in Prague. So it's my pleasure to be here, and yeah. Over to Cartier. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Guilherme Cartier. I work in IBM since 2013. I am based in Sao Paulo, and I have experience on batch environment as a production support analyst. But today, my responsibility goes to automation specialty and developing solutions for IBM clients and IBM services. All right, so we can go ahead.
Yeah.
With the agenda.
Yes, so the agenda, we're gonna start with setting a stage of the APIs. We're gonna do the basic introduction of that. Then we're gonna continue with a REST API and what does it mean essentially for the mainframe platform. Then I'm going to continue and present something about Zowe mediation layer. So these three topics should be about really setting the stage for the use cases we're going to be talking about with Cartier. Then those mentioned use cases, and then we're going to finalize with future premise of the API. So what is ahead of us, what maybe you would be able to do, or you want to do with this content. So we can go ahead to another slide. Thank you. So API is a fairly known term, and it stands for Application Programming Interface. This concept exists as long as two applications wanted to communicate with each other. So if you imagine you are writing a piece of software or an automation, and you want to call a routine or a function which is not native to your current workspace, or to some application which is remote to you. Now, the way how to go about this is to make those resources localized, and this is exactly what API does. So this concept of localizing the resource is very important, and it's even more obvious when you fast forward into current era when we talk about web APIs. Now, web API is a type of an interface where the communication takes place using the internet and web services specific protocols. Much like remote APIs make remote resources appear as local, web APIs do the same thing for resources available on the web. So when you say today API, everybody's gonna think web APIs. Moving on to another term, which is the REST API or RESTful design, which is probably a known term as well to you. So I'm going to just describe what that means. It stands for representational state transfer, and it's an architectural pattern or a style for exposing your program using existing protocols, typically HTTPS. You may think of this as you would have a set of hyperlinks you type in your browser to access different parts of your application. Now the design has a couple of restraints or conditions to be called REST API. For example, it has to be cacheable, it has to be stateless, which means no client information will be stored on server side, and it has to have some kind of uniformity. Speaking about uniformity, there are 4 major verbs used in REST. They are get, post, put, and delete. Get means to get a certain information or you want to do a querying. Then post to create a new resource, put to update, and delete to remove. Moving on to the format or JSON, you probably heard about JSON. It's a most common and standardized way how would your response to those verbs look like. JSON stands for a JavaScript object notation. It is used primarily to transmit data in between server and application.
Yeah, one thing that I think is interesting to notice, Mikhail, is that for REST APIs, most of persons who don't know what that is in the beginning can be quite confusing, the difference between API and REST API.
Yes.
So a kind of oversimplification would be to tell that REST API is basically an URL that returns or receives data, so that it's a way to send information over the internet through an URL, and then you get the data back.
Yeah, exactly. And the JSON as a standard response to those requests, it's very, very common to use JSON because of initially it was part of the or subset of the JavaScript scripting language, and it kind of made, because of its usage, for example, with Python, which is #1 language today, it became pretty standard to use this kind of response. But you can use also XML. Okay, so maybe we can move on to another slide. So Mainframe platform being important part of the industry and backbone for the economy, like everybody says, for more than 50 years, went through very, very similar transition, but it's just, I remember maybe 6, 7, 8 years of when the REST API started to replace the old means of communication. I remember a couple of use cases which were very specific to certain products, like if you know from Broadcom, Endeavor, for example. But now we are facing a demand to open up Mainframe for integration on whole another level. And it's a reasonable requirement considering the amount of traditional APIs we have on the Mainframe platform, right? So, but when you do that and start opening Mainframe to the world, you don't want to sacrifice what was very great about Mainframe, like a security or enormous reliability performance. And also, customer would ask about, they want a cloud-like features such as high availability, scalability, and certain level of standardization. And so that's one of, or some of the reasons why Zowe project was created. Cartier, if you want to go to another slide.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So Zowe is an open source mainframe interface for a next generation. It bridges the enterprise DevOps to the mainframe, shifts the mainframe balance of power, and makes the mainframe an exciting career choice. I just at this point want to make a reference to the webinar which happened on April 11. Mike Bauer and Joe Winchester presented how would Zowe open source project stand out in a DevOps world. So just search for mainframe DevOps using Zowe open source, and you're going to find very useful information and details about this. Regarding the making mainframe an exciting career choice, and Cartier, don't hesitate to chime in here, that my point on this is that on the generational gap, which was mentioned many times before, is that we know for sure that still there's going to be a requirement for people who work with ISPF or quote unquote green screen experience or experienced mainframers in general. But people are retiring, and where, for example, some of us had a couple of years to learn, it's not the situation today. Requirements are changing, and you need more modern tools and those high-level languages to be the core of your business to address that.
Yes, as the market grows and there's many requirements for new professional in the mainframe, and as you well mentioned, many of those old guys from the mainframe, they are retiring, and we need new folks to work on the mainframe, but we don't have the time to train them in the old ways. So there must be a way to simplify the process of learning the mainframe, and I believe that's where the Zowe project comes in, and that's a great alternative.
Yeah, exactly. And if we, for example, say that today 70% of the engineers around mainframe platform are the experts on the green screen, then you want exactly those people to build extensions, REST APIs, understand the technology, and make it maybe easier for others, because those are the experts. And this is what happened essentially in the Zowe project, that there is lots of senior technical staff members who previously worked on mainframes and in ISPF and green screen, and now are very well, have great expertise in building REST APIs. So this is exactly what we need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So before I go into the mediation layer, I really want to talk about this slide to set the stage of what kind of APIs we're going to be talking about during our use cases with Cartier. So I borrowed this slide from IBM. Thank you for to allowing that. So because there is a very clear distinction in between business logic APIs and say system APIs, which we have on the right. And many times I heard this question whether API mediation layer or Zowe kind of works with the business logic APIs. And at this point it doesn't. Like, I think the biggest advantages are on the right. So if you have a compilers, debugging tools, fault analyzers, or some kind of monitoring tools, that's where you would leverage the most the Zowe. And those are the we can call them system APIs or operational / administrative APIs, which would then be leveraged by CLI or via web UI. I think we can go to another slide. Thank you. So Zowe mediation layer, it was presented during another webinar as well, but I would like to really just catch the biggest benefits of this technology. So Zowe mediation layer is or the gateway in general is a very logical and standard extension to mainframe REST APIs. It gives you a single point of access for all system APIs originated from mainframe platform. And it gives you also a standardized look and feel of the API documentation. using something called Swagger component. And in addition to that, it should give you a cloud-like experience, such as high availability, scalability of resources. Now, the main components will be the gateway. You can consider this as the most critical component, because eventually all of your REST API calls will go through this single point of access through the gateway. It is based on Netflix Zowe. Now, cool thing about it, not only because of its Netflix, but also because of Netflix Zowe gives you a load balancing capability. So if you have, I don't know, 2 scaled REST API services, or kind of, let's say, resources for the requests, then you can go after the biggest or the best performing resource there is. Now then, gateway will be represented by single URL, which is a very cool thing for network or security administrators, because eventually you have to register only single URL for all of the REST APIs originated from mainframe platform. And it seems to be a big thing. If Cartier, if you agree with me that I don't know how many times we talked about maybe the security team that they really would love to have just single URL, and multiple URL coming to the domain presents a certain risks to the domain of the company.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing that this allows as well, it makes easier for code or application management, because instead of having several different APIs endpoints, you can have only one for the gateway. So you transfer that responsibility to a platform that is more stable and with high availability and scalability as well. So it's the best of both worlds.
Exactly. So another component will be a discovery service, which is you can understand it as a database or a system registry of the information which is shared among the mediation layers. So discovery service will contain information like this system or service is up and running, and it contains this and that endpoints so that you can use them. And it's kind of, consists of the critical information to share, even when you have like a high availability mode of the gateway setup. And it's based on Netflix Eureka. And then you have the API catalog, which is exactly what the name suggests. It's a catalog of available APIs on the mainframe, and it gives you this standardized look using the Swagger component. Cartier, we can go to another slide. Thanks. So this is just a little bit more complicated picture of the same thing, but I want to talk about the high availability first of HA of the internal component. So you can see that you can have multiple gateways on a single hardware instance, and then you can have also 2 discovery services. So in case you have the gateway on some system, it goes down, or the whole system goes down, you're going to still have the gateway available to you. Then there is also a scalability shown on that picture, and it's essentially, if you look at the bottom, you see a ZOS product, which would be the instance, for example, performance monitoring tool of some sort, and you can set up 2 REST API services to that single product, which gives you the scalability. So if one goes down, the other one is available, as well as it gives you this load balancing capability. You can also scale up 2 instances of the same product, and they can have their own API services, which is not shown here. And and then you also have I'm going to make it very short, is that you also have a login authentication. So if you are accessing the catalog, the biggest constraint was that, or fear maybe, is that I don't want my REST APIs to be accessible from outside, or for some people who are not, let's say, employed to be or equipped to work with those APIs, and it presents also a risk. So we have a login authentication, and how it works is that you're going to be using your mainframe credentials and you are authenticated against the ZOSMF service.
And another thing that I think is cool to mention, in the mainframe, I don't think there's a more important thing as security and availability, right? Because that's what the API mediation layer brings to us, something that it's absolute requirement for mainframe application, the availability and security.
Yes. I think it's been like biggest struggle during this development of the new REST APIs, and once we started shuffling the functionality out of the platform in some cases, we didn't know exactly how the Java security works in mainframe world, etc. And this gives you kind of a good thing from both worlds, because yes, you are authenticated on a web application, which is cool, but the authentication and the generation of the token, etc., really resides on the mainframe still. So it is with the platform, which is good, cool thing.
Nice.
Okay, moving on to another slide. Yeah, so this is the catalog. Just very briefly, you can see the tiled view. On the right, you have the REST APIs onboarded. You can see whether they are all the REST API services are running or none. And on the right, you can see the catalog, and at the bottom, you can see the verbs we talked about, where you can request a certain functionality to be returned to you so that you can use it in your software. We can go on to another slide. Okay, Paul.
So we'll be doing our first poll here. I'll initiate that right now, so you guys will have some moments to check on that. All right, so let me close this right now. Yeah, we had a lot of people voting, and yeah, the results, it seems quite spread out, but the single point of access seems to be the most voted option. And of course, yeah, as we were mentioning, that significantly simplifies the process of maintenance of applications, right? And as a security level as well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the single point of access, and the URL being the only access point to your REST APIs is very, very important.
Yeah. In the second place, we had the high availability that we were just mentioning. That's just a keyword for mainframe in general. And then we had dynamic registry of services and login authentication.
Yeah, I felt a little bit guilty that I didn't mention dynamic registry so much, but yeah, this is one of the biggest strengths, that once you have the REST API service integrated and set up well, on the startup, it's going to be automatically shown in the catalog, which is perfect for system administrators, and also for if there is a person building an application and he has to talk to system administrator about availability of those resources. This is exactly it, that they're going to be up to date, and they don't have to use some kind of additional tool or spreadsheet to sync with each other. Yeah, so standardized documentation seems to be on the last place. Yeah, that's kind of understandable. But yeah, what we are trying to accomplish is really that over these years, there is lots of, like, the implementation is very diverse, and it's kind of for us a tool how to push maybe the other vendors or ourselves to create more standardized API logic and endpoints description. Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to our first use case scenario. I will talk a little bit, guys, about batch environment integration with ServiceNow. And I assume that most of you have already at least heard about ServiceNow, but for those of you who don't know what it is, ServiceNow is basically an incident management tool, very similar to BMC Remedy or IBM Maximo and similar tools like that. So it allows you for incident management and change management and things like that. So this use case, I will show how a REST API integration can be done in the mainframe batch environment with the incident management system. So let's go ahead to the personas of this use case. So here we got the batch operations support and the application support. These two persons, they share similarities, and in some cases they might be even the same person because they handle the batch or an application batch environment. In the case of the operations support, this person is responsible for the batch environment support and monitoring in some cases. And this person uses the ServiceNow application to proactively act on abandoned jobs. And the application support is the person responsible to do a support on a specific application on their customers or a specific batch flow or do some ad hoc requests in the environment. In this case, without the REST API integration, those two persons will be handling the mainframe directly. So they would log in into the terminal and take actions in the batch environment from there. Or they will be creating incidents manually or service requests manually to the other batch operator to perform that manually as well. This use case, the storyline behind it is that, let's say that a job abandons in your mainframe environment. The idea here is that the application support or the batch support wants a simple to use system to take action on this job and automatically update the information about that on an incident that was generated automatically. So they don't have to backtrack, log in on the mainframe, take the action, create an incident, and document that. The idea here is that everything is done automatically. So to do that, a custom ServiceNow application is developed using native ServiceNow services to integrate the incident management system with the mainframe API. So how this works? ServiceNow today allows you to create custom applications inside your ServiceNow instance. So you can create an application to solve your business needs. In this case, we will be creating an application to attend the mainframe batch environment need of an integration, right, with the incident management. So in this case, the remediation action is taken in the mainframe job and it automatically updated in the incident record. So here we have a simple diagram about this. We got on the left side, we got the LFAR in the mainframe environment. We have the workload scheduling tool. And let's say that the job abandons, that will trigger possibly some auto ticketing mechanism that will automatically create a record in our custom application running on ServiceNow. And then instead of logging in on the mainframe to take action, the application support or the batch support will open up this application record, choose the action it wants to take, let's say restart the job. There will be some back-end rules and scripts that will interpret that, and it will run the outbound system, which is basically how ServiceNow handles with the REST API integrations. And that will go to the API mediation layer that we were mentioning. So there will be a single access point for all mainframe APIs. So in this case, the API mediation layer is triggered to do some action in the workload scheduling tool. And then the API mediation layer triggers that action using the workload scheduling tool REST APIs to perform the action. So you can see here we have a full cycle. from the job event to the action remediation and back to the mainframe again. And at the end, when the action is taken, the incident that was created will be automatically updated with the information about who did the action and what was the result of that. So maybe the job abandoned again and you want to try again, do another different thing and force complete the job or something like that. So that's basically this use case using a custom ServiceNow application. And if you have further question on how to do something like that, I suggest you guys to look at the ServiceNow site. They have a development section where you can create a development instance for free, and you can play around with the application creating system, and you can try to trigger REST APIs and do things like that. So I really recommend for those of you who are interested in this sort of stuff. So I'm going to pass back to Mikhail. He will talk a little bit about another use case using REST APIs.
Thank you, Cartier. So it seems to be a very common use case on customer side to build a new homegrown application or wanting to perhaps improve the integration and replace the current methods of passing the data from a service to the application with something more reliable, standard, more better maintainable, and something which has the let's say the guts of the architecture replaceable and easily updatable. So one of the use cases we see a lot is to collect a system metrics information for sake of monitoring. So imagine a mainframe operator on the left whose daily job would be to monitor and control the operation of the hardware and software. The operator would start and stop system tasks, or would work with the system programming and production tool staff to ensure the health and normal operation of the system. And he would then naturally benefit from, instead of doing this monitoring on mainframe in quote unquote green screen and use the traditional tools, he would rather have a customized view where he can be focused on what he really needs. So things like a system partition which equals LPAR, so LPAR overview or performance overview of some kind, or alert summary or WTO display. And so the point is that he would not, in this application, he would not fix the problems right away, but he just needs this focused view so that he can then eliminate the amount of time for him to browse the green screen. So before going to another, so we can go to another slide, I think. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm gonna introduce another two personas. One is mainframe application developer. It's a person who would develop such application and would use modern IDEs, will use the modern source code management tools, and would use a modern code analytics. And I also introduce so that's the person who's going to write and create this dashboard application. And then we have a system administrator who's going to be installing the software, the REST APIs, which are used for sake of this use case, and would also install the mediation layer. We can go to another slide. Great, thanks. So let's look at the diagram briefly so that you can see what I have on my mind. You can see that on the left there is a system administrator who installs the products instances, as I said, and to monitor performance and storage with their corresponding REST APIs. And on the right you can see the application itself. And the personas, developer and the system operator. So in this use case, you see that there is no mediation layer, and there are two separate URLs which are going to be feeding the data into this monitoring application. and it's not scaled, right? So there is a single instance of performance monitoring tool and single instance of storage tool. So let's continue on another slide with this, let's say negative scenario, and picture the use case. Yeah, when so one of the first challenges for a developer would be to figure out whether APIs are available. So for that, the developer would have to go to system administrator who installed the product instance with corresponding API service. But not having a catalog or some form of visualization, they would most likely have to come up with some tool how to synchronize the data with each other. Sysadmin knows that the APIs are critical for application to run, and so he would have to stay in touch or be accessible on demand. Another issue is that during those years, REST API implementation our platform became quite diverse, and some kind of a unique experience which requires additional studying and understanding. So let's go to another slide, please. So after gaining all that information and agreeing on the way how to synchronize this information in between each other, the programming can begin. But during that, something can go wrong, right? So this application developer is creating an application, but something goes wrong, and like a configuration or the service has changed, then or API doc has changed, and or REST API service can be down. So the developer, not knowing the cause, would go to the system admin again, and I'm repeating myself, but it's gonna, they're gonna be out of sync, and they have to spend additional time to sync up. So going, please, another slide, Cartier.
Sure.
Thank you. So now the storyline using the dashboard application with mediation layer. So system operator wants the already mentioned dashboard application to monitor LPAR performance. System administrator installs the layer, which provides visibility over those services. And after the successful installation, in REST API services are discovered. Mainframe application developer goes to API catalog to see what APIs are available to accelerate the development. And he or she finds well-documented endpoints which just serves the purpose, and so the coding can begin. Yeah, so that's a mistake in slides. You can go on. So this is the diagram using the mediation layer. In this case, you can see the mediation layer being present on the screen, and you only have only a single URL feeding the data to the application. You can also have all of the internal components in high availability mode, as well as you can have the REST APIs scaled up as well. Yeah, another slide, please. So this is the storyline using the mediation layer. You can see application developer is super happy about everything. So he or she's going to log into the catalog, check the status of the microservices, and starts browsing the documentation of the REST APIs using the Swagger. Yeah, so that's from my side on the use case, everything. And there is a new poll coming.
Yeah, so I'll be starting that right now, and I'll let that poll go at least a minute, because I noticed that everyone is engaged in voting. So all right, so let's close this poll. let me share. So the results, many voted not applicable right now, but we have a lot of people voting as well as that will be implemented within 12 months, and 18% already implementing. So we have a significant portion interested in the application of REST APIs in the system, and many of those already implemented. And we have 11% on 12 to 24 months, and 11% over 24 months as well. So as we all know, implementing new features or new things, especially in the mainframe environment, takes some time because we need to change a lot of things. We need to have a lot of approval. So that seems reasonable over 24 months implementation, right? What do you think, Mikhail?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see the results. Non-applicable, obviously the biggest number.
Right.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see whether yeah, those use cases are being implemented using Zowe, or whether the Zowe inspired such use cases. Or yeah, it goes to show that probably what we are showing is relevant to the market, and people are actually doing something with it, which is perfect.
All right, moving forward with a future premise of APIs.
Yes.
Would you like to comment on that, Mikhail?
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. Yeah, so the point is that all the major players in mainframe world are investing in modernizing the mainframe experience. You could see it on the Zowe project, and we there are a couple of products who are investing in maybe integrating in with mediation layers. So you're going to see more and more products being up to date with this technology and accessible via mediation layer, and leverage all of those benefits. And so the Zowe consortium consists of a Broadcom, IBM, and Rocket. So we are all aboard with this project, and it's a quite a big part of the industry. These three companies who are really taking this seriously, and you can also create your own REST APIs using the sample. So one of our architects in Broadcom is making a sample, which we previously used only internally. He's going to make it into the open source. So he's currently working on that, and it's a great opportunity to, if you are a legacy product and you don't have REST APIs available yet and you just want to start, then this sample is gonna hopefully give you some hints. And then also, if you have a existing REST API service and you just want to onboard it with the mediation layer and with the Zowe ecosystem, we have a enablers, Spring Boot enablers, accessible in Zowe as well. So you can take those, everything is documented, and you can start integrating.
Right, and yeah. Just pointing out that REST API integration, guys, it's a market standard, so it only makes sense for the mainframe modernization process that the REST APIs are embraced in this new world of integration and modernization. So that's where the API mediation layer comes in, and this partnership between Broadcom, IBM, and Rocket. Everybody is investing on REST API, so that's the future, basically.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you want to know more about Zowe adventures, you can go to the Zowe.org website, or there is a commercial offering from Broadcom, which gives you some of the functionality today from the Zowe. And yeah, so moving on to the Q&A, Mitch, do you want to take this?
Yes, thank you. We've got some great questions loaded up here. Appreciate that from all the audience. I'm just going to jump right into the questions that we're getting, if it's okay, guys. First
Yeah.
one is, can the API gateway also integrate with CA service management or other service management platforms like Remedy, like it does with ServiceNow?
Regarding the integration with Remedy, I'm not sure if Remedy allows that level of integration as ServiceNow allows. But I didn't, honestly, I didn't look at Remedy to see if they have some kind of integration mechanisms as well defined as ServiceNow. So that will be great because many of the customers use Remedy, so it will be an awesome way to have a Remedy integration with the mainframe. Now, the other question, can you repeat that, Michal? Sorry.
Yes, you want to go to the next question, or the end of it was, is it integrate with Remedy like it does with ServiceNow? You ready to go for the next
Right.
question?
Yeah, the first part of the question, it was mentioning something about CA product.
Oh, yes. Can the API gateway also integrate with CA service management or other service management platforms?
Mika, do you know how about that? Since it's a CA product, I'm not sure if the
Not explored yet, but if you previously worked with a system APIs for which mediation layer is meant for, then I think, if you work with URL and you want to pass along the data, it should be possible, obviously. So it's the matter of maybe exploring that use case a little bit more. But fair point to say that it has to be let's say it has to be a requirement for the REST APIs originated from mainframe platform, which I believe it can in this use case.
Great. How about we move on to our next question? Does Zowe mediation layer register users/stakeholders with an API/service so that if it is due to change, they are notified or consulted?
Well, that's a great question. Mikhail, do you know that mediation layer has this feature?
Could you maybe repeat that again, please?
Yeah. Does the Zowe mediation layer register users of an API service so that if it is due to change, so if there's a change, I think is what he means, they are notified or consulted?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know how to respond to that. Yeah, but
okay.
Is there a way how to go back to this to the person who asked that question and try to figure that out?
Okay, Mike. If Mike Hughes answered that or asked that question, Mike, if you have any clarification, you want to post another question about that, feel free. We'll try to get to it.
Yeah.
Great, let's move on to our next question. Could we use Zowe as a mediation layer to connect UC4 with OPSMVS?
OPSMVS, yeah.
At the end, guys, the mediation layer would work if the system that you are trying to connect, correct me if I'm wrong, Mikhail, but the system that you're trying to connect also needs to have a REST API available. So today, I don't know if OpsMVS has a REST API interface. If don't, they need to put that in the pipeline so it can be used within the Zowe API mediation layer. So if there is an OpsMVS REST API service, I don't see why mediation layer couldn't go in that.
Yeah, this is exactly actually what we need. If we have those use cases, we can maybe talk to those teams. OpsMVS is a Broadcom product, and we might be able to influence that, because when we initially started with mediation layer, we said this is a piece of architecture, and we want other products teams to realize what kind of use cases they have, so that they can tell us the feedback on the architecture we are providing. And with some of the teams, it was a little bit of a kind of situation where they wouldn't know how and why and what 8 points they would extend through the mediation layer, and what kind of use cases are there. So if there is a requirement on the functionality, I believe OpsMVS is currently somewhere in the roadmap to build that. So it would be great if we can get this use case somehow written down, and I can then talk to the product managers in Broadcom.
Maybe if the person submitting that question, it was Rose, wants to provide any more information to you, share that along. You can pass that along to the developers.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Another question. This is a little bit long. Let me see if I can get through it. Also, could Zowe be used with Rex as the language? I understand that it's meant to be used with scripting language because more people know scripting than coding languages like Rex. But we would like to use this product and need to close the gap between old mainframes and people coming into the field. So can it be?
Right.
It can be used with Rex, but is that possible? I guess is the question.
Right. So let me answer that, and Mikhail, correct me if I'm wrong. But absolutely, I do that all the time. I use Rex and with a mix with some other language using the Zowe CLI. I believe that you were mentioning your questions regarding the CLI version, the command line interface. So absolutely. Actually, there is a plugin on Visual Studio Code that you can use. Visual Studio Code is an IDE for Microsoft, but it's free. You can download that. And the community of Zowe CLI developed a plugin on there where you can directly connect to mainframe data sets and you can code right on. So you don't have to log in the terminal itself, and then you can do some Rex coding right there. The way that I do today, and that's the way that I would recommend, is to use a mix of mainframe languages as Rex, but also learn some JavaScript or Python, some more modern languages, so you can mix that up using Zowe CLI and have a better experience using Zowe CLI. What do you think, Mikhail?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, it's a very good interpretation of that.
Very good. Let's move on to our next question. Though there was a lot of mention of system APIs, please confirm application APIs exposed by CICS, CICS, or DB2 based apps can also be managed by the API ML.
Yeah, so the point about the system APIs is that we would definitely they can mediate through the layer. It's just that we just didn't want to go into the direction of more mature API management tools like APG, or to go into the sphere of ZOS Connect. But I think you can do an integration of those products and more mature application management tools, and to just interface with mediation layer this way. But it's definitely possible. It's just that we wanted to restrain ourselves into certain group of APIs. I don't know if I answered to that question.
That sounds like you did. Next question. Can I upgrade from ZOS, say from version 2.1 to 2.2, using any of Zowe CLI on mainframes?
I would say that you can, because Zowe uses a product called ZOSMF, and the ZOSMF has workflows that you can develop. So if you develop a system upgrade workflow, you can trigger that using Zowe CLI. So through your command line, let's say on Linux on your workstation, you can upgrade a mainframe LPAR ZOS system to do that one, to do that two. Is my interpretation correct, Mikhail? Just interrupt me if I'm saying something.
Absolutely right. And even our teams currently are working on a script to make this easier for you. So I think you would be able to shoot a script via CLI, which is going to upgrade you from previous version to newer version of Zowe, because we know that this was a struggle. Basically, right now you have to, reinstall completely. So this is something which will be delivered in maybe up to 2 months, something like that, or within a month.
Wonderful. It looks like we have time for about one more question here. I'm going to expand this question a little bit. What was asked is how much latency does Zowe introduce on average on write? And maybe you can also speak just of any latency or overhead that you've experienced, what you've learned working with Zowe.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a sensitive topic. Unfortunately, we don't have our architects here, but essentially when we were creating, right, so Zowe has a couple of components, and one of the components is mediation layer. And mediation layer was designed so that we don't add too much into the CPU consumption when there are no REST APIs running through the gateway, as well as there is more APIs running. And this is something we are just exploring, right? But the whole point is that we are very concerned about this, we are very focused on the CPU consumption, because we know that it can be, for a product like this, it can be very, very, very bad. So this is something which has always highest priority in all of the components to talk about the CPU consumption.
Okay, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's great answer.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, let's wrap things up. I'd like to thank everyone for your excellent questions, and also to our speakers for the insightful and thoughtful answers that you provided. In the
Absolutely.
remaining minutes, I'd like to announce our winners of our $50 Amazon gift cards. So let's congratulate our 3 winners: Gerardo Amador, Praveen Sharma, and Lenore Adam. Yay, congratulations to you. Thanks for hanging in there.
Guys.
We appreciate you attending, and we thank everyone for being part of this. I know a question that was asked, reminder that our webinar recording and slides will be made available via an email link, and they'll be up on the devops.com website later. I know also there was a question asked about the resources being available, and I know that there is also a Slack group called Open Mainframe Project.Slack if you want to join that and be part of that community. Great. Well, I'd also like to remind everyone to check our devops.com website for more exciting content and upcoming webinars. Well, let me thank, and please join me in thanking, Michal Shupak and Guilherme Cartier from Broadcom and IBM, respectively. I'd like to thank you for being part of the webinar, and I'd like to thank our audience, of course, for joining us and spending your valuable time with us. This is Mitch Ashley. It's been my pleasure to host your webinar today, and we wish everyone a great day.
Thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure to present to you guys.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. Have a nice day.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.